One of the greatest fears of this recessionary cycle is that deglobalization will lead to the greatest hyperinflation of our lives. That it's not just the expansion of the money supply, making Austrian economists roll over in their graves. It is not just the money printing and stimulus that led to the greatest inflation since the 1980s for over 40 years, but is actually potentially the frustration that businesses face due to broken supply chains during the COVID pandemic that potentially will lead to deglobalization and therefore massive inflation. The argument is simple. You can't trust China anymore. You can't trust the existing supply chains, so everybody needs to reshore. And this argument has been made for years that as companies reshore their products and their manufacturing back to America, the costs of manufacturing will go to the moon. And if the costs of manufacturing go to the moon, folks, we are all screwed because we will feel nothing other than hyperinflation. And so I've written out this thesis on a document here, and then we're going to go into a piece from T.S. Lombard on globalization. Let me first give you this reminder. Remember the 2022 theme. We will have hyperinflation because you can't trust China. We're going to onshore all manufacturing. We're going to rebuild our own supply chains because we can't trust anyone. And what was Kevin's response? Kevin's response was very simple. In my opinion, this was my opinion, okay? My opinion was that thesis was ludicrous. If you've been watching my channel for over a year now, at least a year, you know that I've regularly said this idea of deglobalization and hyperinflation is ludicrous. My thesis was, why would you let one supply chain snarl ignore or lead you to ignore the cost benefits of lower labor costs in other countries? Remember, that is also a benefit to other people, right? When we bring jobs to Mexico, where the average hourly wage is $3.50, and we build a Tesla gigafactory there, what does that actually mean? It actually means you're creating more demand for labor in the area, which gives the wage earners more pricing power, which allows wages to go up. But it's still cheaper than what you could manufacture for in America. So it's disinflationary for Americans, and it helps grow a market wherever we go. So I called for something known as reglobalization. You know this. We've talked about this pretty regularly. I've regularly talked about reglobalization as my thesis for what would happen. And I believe, and at the same time, we've seen Apple then move to India, Vietnam, and Mexico, gaining a lot of clout along with Indonesia, Taiwan becoming basically an area known for its advanced chip making now, especially with Taiwan semiconductors. But then we also have China now freaking out and realizing, oh my Lord, we may have messed up. How can we get American companies back? This was a big deal, right? And China, after all, with Xi Jinping making his conference in front of the Chinese Communist Party, applauding central planning and socialism, but for the first time nearly ever, applauding capitalism as something that would be a priority for them. And now inviting whom? Well, not only American companies back, but recently meeting with Tim Cook and meeting again soon with Elon Musk, the premier, inviting Elon Musk back to Shanghai. Why? So they can brag about the success story of American manufacturing going to China. That's what China's good at. They've become really good at manufacturing. Consider what Foreign Affairs told us about China. They told us that the Chinese, when they decided to go all in on solar panel manufacturing, not only did they make the cheapest solar panels, but they made the best solar panels. So, what do we finally have the institutions now saying? Well, look at this, folks. I feel vindicated. I feel vindicated. T.S. Lombard, the future of reglobalization. I saw this and I just about fell off my bunk bed this morning. I cannot believe that I actually have now, for the first time since we've been talking about this for years, actually seen an institution finally talk about reglobalization. I could not be more happy. I'm so happy. My heart is palpitating at such high levels. I have to remind you to get life insurance in as little as 5 minutes by going to medkevin.com/life. See, look, I changed the banner. I changed the banner so quickly because I'm streaming and bringing this stream to you via the paid promotion of StreamYard. medkevin.com/StreamYard to learn how I bring this stream to you. It's pretty awesome. right next to the links for building your wealth link down below and the courses. Okay, so the future of reglobalization. What do we have here? Well, hyperglobalization may be over, and the US China decoupling may actually be fueling not a deglobalization, but a reglobalization. And in other words, Mexico, Vietnam, Taiwan, India, Indonesia are the future. These are now the winners as global companies, international, multinational companies seek to rebuild global supply chains. And Mexico will be a very large beneficiary of not only the Inflation Reduction Act, but the move away and out of China. China is then widely expected to fight back against Mexico and India and Indonesia trying to take this expansion. The more Mexico, India, and Indonesia take business from China, guess what happens? The more China tries to incentivize manufacturers to go back to China. Folks, what happens when China tries to incentivize people to go back to China because people are now fleeing to India and Vietnam or Taiwan? You have a pricing war. You have lost PP. The manufacturers, the manufacturing nations have lost their PP. Their pricing power is waning. Well, the legacy ones, right? The legacy manufacturer of China is losing its pricing power. Instead, you now have more people wanting to share PP. As a result, American companies, multinational companies, the Teslas, the Volkswagen, the Fords, the GMs, the massive ones like obviously the Apples, the Microsoft, they all benefit. Enphase, massive international producer now of ASIC-based microinverters, building factories over where Top G has finally managed to go from jail to house arrest, allegedly, according to the BBC. We'll see what ends up happening with that. But anyway, we'll see. So focusing here on what this means. Reglobalization, folks, is a fancy way of saying prepare for big, fat, thick deflation. Yes, big fat deflation. I believe that this competition between China losing what it was once good at and everyone else will actually likely lead to more deflation, especially as India and Indonesia and Taiwan realize they have a limited window here before China slaps back. Now, keep in mind that in the past, India has failed at becoming a low-cost global tech hub. Why? Because of labor laws, infrastructure, and bureaucracy that continues to constrain the managing sector. Let me give you a simple explanation as to why this happens in India versus China. China is centrally planned. China is communist. We know this. But they are starting to enjoy some of the benefits of capitalism, right? But in a centrally planned economy, what do you have? You have the ability to streamline construction. You can build a gigafactory in Texas or Berlin in 2 years. You can do it in 1 year in China. And the reason you can do that in China is because you have central planning. Xi Jinping can pick up the phone and say, get it done. And then it gets done. Water lines are built in 40 days. The sewage systems, the plumbing systems, the electrical grids, everything gets re-engineered to accommodate Tesla via central planning. That is one of the fantastic benefits of central planning. Central planning in China is deflationary for America. Recognize that. Now, what about India? Well, India is very different. India's government is like a fractal system where every local government, the more local you go, the more the rules are different. There's no consistent permitting between different locales and municipalities. There's no central planning. Everything is based on whose pockets are getting lined more at the local level. And now, look, I'm not trying to suggest that India is corrupt. I'm trying to suggest that it's a developing country and there's obviously going to be less transparency than in other countries. But the point here is T.S. Lombard is making a clear argument that maybe it's not as easy to say, oh, let's just go to India or Vietnam. And China realizes that. And that's why I think China over the next year is actually not going to be a massive negative for America. It's actually going to be a massive boon for disinflation. So, this call for reglobalization, I think, is fantastic, especially since now we're moving to this idea of uh, going from a just-in-time style of manufacturing to a more of just-in-case model. Uh, this is really a way of, okay, let's understand that really quickly. Basically, companies generally don't like holding inventory on their shelves because it rots, it gets stolen, it decays, it depreciates. So usually if you're manufacturing a car, you want the wheels for the car to show up the minute that you actually need them, not any sooner. That's very important for keeping your costs down. Very important. But what's incredible here is that now companies are running such more resilient supply chains that once they actually move to more of a just in case model and they have more inventory on the shelves and much smoother supply chains, we will probably go from normal supply chains. Like let's draw that out just to understand the thesis of deflation here for a moment. If this was your normal supply chain and the supply chain got very, very expensive because of COVID, and now the supply chains are becoming looser, you will probably, through reglobalization, you will probably have cheaper and looser supply chains than you ever had pre-pandemic. So the pandemic might be exactly what we needed to end up creating less less inflation and more disinflation, potentially deflation. It's actually a fantastic piece here on why disinflation could be coming thanks to re-globalization. Now, there is still the fear that there will still be political strife between China and America. After all, China is being labeled as a foreign country of concern or a foreign entity of concern, which actually limits some of the benefits of manufacturing in China and limits some of the tax credits of businesses being able to do business in China who also want to take tax benefits in America. In fact, there was just a massive piece. Let me see if I can pull it. There was just a very massive piece about how chip companies will potentially have to choose China or the United States. It's actually very relevant to this discussion right now. Let's go ahead and pull that up. And while I don't think that will end up being true in the long term, I think in the near term, that could be a choice that businesses have to face, especially since you're seeing that as well with I think this was like a Barron's piece or something like that. But anyway, especially as you're seeing that with now, there we go. Found it. It was a Wall Street Journal piece. Let's go ahead and pull this up together. We'll look at this together. Oh, it's going to make me go vertical. That's lame. No, I don't want to do that. Let me see if I can get it on my laptop. But anyway, the argument is that, well, I mean, maybe you can get disinflationary deglobalization, but if politics stand in the way, then what you actually potentially risk is more inflation in the short term as basically companies try to get their tax credits in America. But by getting the tax credits in America, you're actually printing stimulus checks again, right? I believe that. I actually believe the biggest stimulus checks that are going out right now are going to chip companies and energy and battery based companies. There's a reason my biggest exposure right now to stocks is in the space of chips and energy, because that's where the stimmy checks are going, folks. And after all, remember, I'm your stimmy check expert. uh, anyway, so let's look at this Wall Street Journal piece because it gives us some really good insight. Stand by. I will share the screen thanks to StreamYard. Let's see how easy it is. Oh, that is so easy. That is nice. Actually, can I do this? No, that goes to my phone. This works pretty well. That's interesting. I'll have to play with my little default settings a little. Ooh, that's kind of cool. That's not as cool. That's not as cool. This is pretty cool. I love this thing. The software is so cool. Anyway, okay. So for chip makers, a choice between US and China looms. The semiconductor companies seeking federal grants under the CHIPS Act could face a tough decision: take Washington's help to expand in the US or preserve their ability to expand in China. The Biden administration last week proposed new rules detailing restrictions chip companies would face on operations in China and other countries of concern if the companies accept taxpayer funding. Some of the proposed restrictions, known as China guardrails, were tougher than the industry expected. Lawyers and national security analysts said they expect blah, blah, blah. Basically, now there's the potential, because of these stricter restrictions, that basically companies might have to decide: do you want to manufacture a lot of your pieces or parts in China or not? Now, you could potentially manufacture non-essential. What the heck is iPhone yellow? You could potentially manufacture non-essential goods in China. These could be non-advanced chips, or they could also be chips such as parts in cars that are not advanced, or non-battery related parts in cars. You can still manufacture cars in China. So Gig of Shanghai doesn't get killed. It's just a lot of the assembly and battery tech has to be done in America. I really think let me put it this way. I think a lot of this is unnecessary fear, uncertainty, and doubt. Now, notice that's a difference from just calling it FUD. But I think a lot of it is unnecessary because I think companies will be smart and they'll adapt. See, look at this. Samsung is building a $17 billion facility in Taylor, Texas. Well, that's interesting. I didn't actually know that. I'm going to look up Taylor, Texas. Maybe that'll be a place for House Hack. Taiwan Semiconductors is building outside of Phoenix. You've got Intel building like crazy in Ohio, I believe it is. But you also have now a partnership between Tesla and CATL expected to be built in America. It's being molded apparently right now. Tesla said to be molding battery plant partnership somewhere in America. This is all to end up getting the tax credits. So that's why I think there's potentially a little too much fear, uncertainty, and doubt, because I think these companies will just manufacture in America. That could increase costs. But here's another thing that nobody's talking about right now. You could literally just move this type of manufacturing to Mexico, and you could get the benefit of the lower cost of doing business, while also potentially getting the tax credits, right? So you could get the lower labor costs. I mean, all of these acts that we have passed, in my opinion, are just a literal boon to Mexico. It would not surprise me to see maybe even like an Apple assembly plant or some form of Apple manufacturing. There we go. In Mexico, so that way you can get North American credits when they're applicable. If you need to get energy credits, manufacture your ASICs for Enphase in Mexico. In the meantime, we saw this ad for a yellow iPhone. I did not know they were doing a yellow iPhone. This is just me getting distracted by a squirrel, basically. But they've come out with more colors here. Look at that. What is this? Purple? My goodness. I guess the yellow one's the new one. It's actually kind of cool. I like that. Anyway, I don't know why I got distracted on that. So I think this is somebody here on Twitch just wrote, can we talk about the attack on the petrodollar that nobody is talking about? Well, apparently you missed my video where I literally went into detail on this yesterday. So if you type into YouTube, Meet Kevin Petrodollar, let me get you the exact title of the video. Oh yeah, here it is. The Collapse of the Dollar, the End of America, and the Rise of China. Now, I was actually extremely proud of this thumbnail. I made this thumbnail, and let me click the right button here. Which button do I want? This button. Yeah, look at that top thumbnail. How sexy is that? I mean, look at that thumbnail. I mean, it's just like, it's like the dollar, but it's like a zombie dollar. But anyway, if you type this in on YouTube, you will learn everything you need to. Look, it even says hashtag petrodollar. See that? The Collapse of the Dollar, the End of America, and the Rise of China. If you have not watched this video yet, I highly encourage it because it will tear apart your fear of the petrodollar here. So anyway, okay, good, very well. So now A+ Photoshop work. Thank you. Now, I have to run to the Elite Hustlers course member live stream. So I highly appreciate you all being here. I absolutely encourage that you make sure you take advantage of the 69% off coupon code by going to metkevin.com/join. Make sure you go to metkevin.com/StreamYard to learn about how I did this stream today. Make sure you go to metkevin.com/life to get your life insurance in as little as 5 minutes, which you can Apple Pay or Android Pay for. And of course, make sure you get 12 free stocks by going to mettkevin.com/Weeble. 12 totally free stocks by signing up at Weeble. mettkevin.com/free. You could sell those stocks right away. And folks, we'll see you in the next one. Thank you so much. We'll see you in the Elite Hustlers live stream for Saturday morning next.